What if everything you've been told about civil wars in Africa isn't the full story? What if the real causes aren't just what you hear in the news, like ethnic conflict or ancient rivalries, but something far deeper, more complex, and in many ways more unsettling? Because the shocking truth is this: most civil wars don't just happen. They are built slowly, quietly, over time, until one day they explode. To understand why, we have to go back, not to the moment the first shot is fired, but to conditions that make conflict almost inevitable. For many African countries, the roots of civil war stretch back to the colonial era. Borders were drawn by foreign powers with little regard for people living there. Entire communities, different languages, cultures, and political systems were forced into single nations. At the same time, groups that had lived together were sometimes split apart. When independence came, these new nations inherited fragile systems. There were weak institutions, limited resources, and deep divisions that had never truly been resolved. And suddenly, the responsibility of holding everything together fell on new leaders, often without the tools or stability needed to succeed. But history alone doesn't start wars. It creates pressure, and pressure builds when power becomes the ultimate prize. In many cases, political systems became highly centralized, meaning control of the government meant control of the country's wealth, military, and opportunities. Losing power didn't just mean losing an election. It could mean losing everything. So politics became a high-stakes game. Leaders fought to stay in power. Opposition groups felt excluded, marginalized, or even threatened. Over time, frustration grew, trust eroded, and eventually, some groups stopped believing change could happen through peaceful means. That's when the risk of conflict rises sharply. Another major factor is resources, something that should be a blessing, but often becomes a source of tension. Many African nations are rich in natural resources like oil, diamonds, and minerals. But instead of benefiting everyone, these resources sometimes become controlled by a small group. This creates inequality. And when people feel excluded from the wealth of their own country, resentment builds. In some cases, armed groups form not just for political reasons, but to gain control of these valuable resources. Conflict becomes not only about power, but about profit. And then there's identity. You probably heard civil wars described as ethnic conflicts. But the truth is more complicated. Ethnicity itself is not the cause. It's often used as a tool. Leaders and groups may use identity, ethnic, religious, or regional, to mobilize support. It creates a sense of us versus them, making it easier to rally people, justify actions, and deepen divisions. Over time, this kind of messaging can turn neighbors into enemies. It hardens lines that were once flexible, and once violence begins, it becomes even harder to reverse. But there's another layer that often goes unnoticed: external influence. During different periods in history, global powers have had interests in African countries, whether for strategic, political, or economic reasons. Sometimes, this has meant supporting certain governments or groups over others. Even today, international involvement, direct or indirect, can shape conflicts in ways that aren't always visible from the outside. And when you combine all these factors, historical divisions, political struggles, economic inequality, identity tensions, and outside influence, you begin to see a pattern. Civil wars are rarely caused by one thing. They are the result of multiple pressures building at the same time, like cracks forming in a structure. And when those cracks are ignored for too long, the collapse can be sudden and devastating. But here's something equally important and often overlooked. Civil wars are not permanent. Across Africa, there are also powerful stories of recovery, resilience, and peace building. Communities rebuild, nations reform. People find ways to move forward, even after the darkest periods. And that's why understanding the real causes matters. Because when we move beyond simplified explanations, we can start to see what actually needs to change. Stronger institutions, fairer distribution of resources, inclusive governance, and efforts to build trust across communities. These are not easy solutions, but they are possible. So the next time you hear about conflict somewhere in the world, remember, there's always more beneath the surface. More history, more context, more human stories that don't fit into simple headlines. And understanding those stories is the first step toward understanding the world itself. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you the most about the causes of civil wars? And what topic would you like to see next? Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.